You're watching BCTV. We're all about Branford. You're watching BCTV, Branford Government Television, a service of Branford Community Television. This program is brought to you in part through the support of the town of Branford.
We'll call this meeting of the Branford Planning Zoning Commission to order. It is Thursday, May 2nd, 2024.
Recording in progress.
7:02 p.m. Thursday, May 2nd, 2024. We'll introduce members of the commission and staff to begin. So let's start. Joe Chadwick. Joe, are you here?
Joe Chadwick is present.
Thank you, Joe. Fred Russo. Fred, are you here?
Fred Russo is present.
Joe Vayuso. Joe, are you here?
Joe Vayuso present.
Thank you, Joe. Marcy Pelusi. Marcy, are you here?
Marcy Pelusi is here.
Thank you, Marcy. Massimo Liguri, you here?
Massimo Liguri is here.
And our staff this evening, our town planner, Harry Smith. Harry, are you here?
I am here.
And our assistant planner, Evan Brining. Evan, you're here?
Here.
And our clerk recording secretary lurking in the background is Michelle Martin. I am Chuck Anders, chair. We'll start by asking Fred to read the notice of public hearing, our secretary.
Okay. Legal notice, Town of Branford. The Planning and Zoning Commission of the Town of Branford, Connecticut hereby gives notice of public hearings to be held on Thursday, May 2nd, 2024 at 7 p.m. by remote technology to consider the applications listed below. Information regarding how to participate in the public hearings will be provided on the Commission's meeting agenda that will be posted on the town's website at least 24 hours prior to the meeting. Application number 24-2.9, special exception for a proposed residential building with 3 dwelling units, section 7.18, located at 3537 Harrison Avenue, 3537 Harrison House, LLC, care of Rachel Kelly, applicant and owner. Application number 24-2.10, special exception for grading, section 6.8, located at 3537 Harrison Avenue, 3537 Harrison House, LLC, care of Rachel Kelly, applicant and owner. Application 24-3.3, zoning regulation amendment, remove section 7.19B, number 6, to delete this 20 event limit. Attorney James J. Burrito, care of Nuzzo Properties, LLC, applicant. And application 24-4.1, special exception for an accessory apartment located at 342 Shore Drive, Preston Handler, applicant and owner. At said hearings, all persons will have the right to be heard. Copies are on file in the Planning and Zoning Commission's office at the Planning and Zoning Department, 1019 Main Street, Branford, Connecticut, 06405. Written communications may be sent to the above address or to planning and zoning at branford-ct.gov. Branford Planning and Zoning Commission, C. Andres, chairperson.
Thank you, Fred. And by the way, thanks for chairing the meeting last time. I really appreciate it. And I viewed it. It looked great. You guys don't need me, so that's great. Thanks for
Well, Chuck, let me just say thank you for coming back today.
Okay.
Being here.
So we'll follow our normal format for public hearings, which is the applicant goes first, explains the application, including any consultants. After that, we turn it over to the commission and staff. Typically get a summary of the staff report from a staff member, open up for questions, comments from commission members. And then we open it up to the public. We ask that you state your name and address for the record. And make your comments. After the public portion is done, we allow the applicant to respond to any public comments, as well as any other questions or comments from commission members. We may or may not close the public hearing, depending on how it goes. And with that, I'm going to ask Evan to explain the process for the public and applicants to participate in the public hearing process.
Sure, if you'd like to participate during the public hearing, You can, down at the bottom of your screen, there's a raise hand button. Please select this if you'd like to participate. If you're dialing in by phone, you can press *9, and we ask that everyone please state their name at the beginning of their comment.
Chuck Anders, Chair. Thank you, Evan. So we're going to follow our regular agenda here, and the first two items have been withdrawn. That's 3537 Harrison Avenue, LLC. That was a special exception for proposed residential building with 3 dwelling units and special exception for grading, and those applications have been withdrawn. That means that brings us then to item number 3 on our agenda, which is Preston Handler, applicant and owner, 342 Shore Drive. This is a special exception for an accessory apartment. Is the applicant ready to proceed? Looks like you're muted.
There you are. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Preston Handler. Again, don't know exactly what information you'll be looking for from me, but I can tell you, I just see they put up the A2 survey that was done very recently. We had that done as part of the application process for the accessory apartment. I moved into this house about 18 months ago, and there was an existing apartment over the garage with a tenant in there. And that was how the MLS listing appeared, that there was, in fact, this apartment with the tenant. So when we found out that we needed to go through the procedure here to get the special exception, I hired an attorney, Robin Sandler, who can't be here tonight, but he's worked with myself and with Evan to make sure that we fit all the boxes. And any questions that you all have about any of this, we're happy to answer, but I'm not sure what else you require from me at this time.
Chuck Anders, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Handler. Maybe we'll ask Evan to explain this, go through the staff report, and if we have any questions, we will fire away. So,
Right.
Evan, perhaps you can review with us your staff report for this application.
Sure. Like Mr. Handler said, there's an existing apartment on this property. The original use when the zoning for the town of Branford went into effect was 2-family with 2 units inside the principal structure. At some point in time, they essentially moved one of those units into the garage. So he's here today legalizing this apartment in the rear. They meet the requirements of the R3 district as well as the accessory apartment requirements from section 7.4. They meet the off-street parking requirements. They also appear to meet the special exception criteria. Staff recommends the following findings. One, that the commission finds that the property is consistent with the special exception criteria from section 9.8. Any proposed lighting has to be compliant with section 6.7. And prior to the issuance of a certificate of zoning compliance or a certificate of occupancy, the owner shall file a deed restriction on the land records, requiring that the unit, if rented, be rented at rates that would be deemed affordable.
Chuck Anders, Chair. Thank you, Evan.
No problem.
Questions or comments from commission members staff before we open up to the public?
Chuck, Fred Russo, I have one question. Maybe Ms. Handler can answer. I'm just curious, how long was that apartment in existence before you bought the property?
You're muted again.
Am I muted?
No, not you, Fred.
I'm good.
There we go.
Hi, I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Kathy Conlon. I'm a licensed real estate agent, and I also live with Preston. So this apartment was here before we bought it. It's only a little 500 square foot studio. And I believe the owner was a builder, and I believe his son might have been living there prior to. But when we bought the house, the tenant was in place. They have just since moved out. So we don't know, I know it was in place when we bought it. We don't know how long, but I think his son was living there before the tenant, the current tenant.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Fred. Chuck Anders, Chair. Are there other questions or comments from commission members or staff before we open up to the public? Hearing none, then let's open up. Does any member of the public wish to comment?
Just to reiterate, down at the bottom of your screen, there's a raise hand button. If you'd like to ask a question or make a comment, please select that button, or you can type that you'd like to participate into the chat. It's like Matt Radulski.
Okay, I'm unmuted. This is Matt Radulski of the Branford Historical Society. Leaving aside the issue that the LLC is called Harrison House, which is the Town Historical Museum's name. This is on Harrison Avenue, which I believe is inside the Center Town District National Historic District. I didn't have a chance to check it. Yeah.
Where are you commenting? Which application are you commenting on?
I'm sorry, I'm looking at the 35 to 37 Harrison on the agenda.
Oh, no.
Okay, those applications have been withdrawn.
Sorry, I had to join late because of work. Okay,
Right, I'm sorry. Yeah.
I will be quiet now. Which item on the agenda are you on?
We're on item number 3, which is the accessory apartment for 342 Short Drive.
Oh, I'm in favor.
Okay.
I'll go on mute. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Radulski.
You're welcome, Mr. Smith.
Are there other members of the public that wish to comment? Evan, you see anybody?
I do not see anyone.
Any, turn it back to the applicant. Mr. Handler, any additional final comments you'd like to make?
None that I can think of that would be relevant at this time.
Okay. Any further questions, comments from commission members?
I mean, just to be, excuse me, just to be clear, it started out as a 2-family, went to a 1-family with a detached apartment, so the net density has not changed.
Correct.
Correct.
Thank you.
Sure. Any further comments from commission members or staff? Hearing none, then I think we will close this matter as a public hearing. This is probably something we can take up in a little bit, and we thank you very much, Mr. Handler.
Okay, thank you.
That brings us then, I think that's our only public hearing item. Harry, I noticed that we would typically look at minutes, and I didn't see the word minutes on the agenda, even though that looked like there were some from the last meeting that were sent out.
I think that was an oversight. Staff's collective part here. So I guess technically you would need to add minutes to the agenda as an item, take a vote, and then you could take them up. If you wanted to, we could just defer that to the next meeting and do 2 at once. Up to you.
Sure. Well, when they were sent out, so let's go ahead and take care of them. Is there a motion to add approval of the minutes for the April 18th, 2024 meeting to the agenda?
Fred Russo, so moved.
Motion made by Fred. Is there a second?
Second by Chadwick.
Second by Joe Chadwick. Further discussion? All in favor? Joe Chadwick?
Joe Chadwick is in favor.
Fred Russo?
Fred Russo in favor.
Joe Vayuzo?
Joe Vayuso in favor.
Marcy?
Marcy's in favor.
And Chair's also in favor. Okay, so we've added to the agenda the review of possible approval of the Thursday, April 18th, 2024 minutes. Have you had a chance to look at those? And if so, someone want to make a motion with respect to those minutes?
Chadwick makes that motion.
Motion made by Joe Chadwick to approve the draft minutes for the April 18th, 2024 meeting. Is there a second?
Vayuso seconds.
Joe Vayuzo seconds. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Joe Chadwick?
Joe Chadwick is in favor.
Fred Russo?
Fred Russo in favor.
Joe Vayuzo?
Vayuso in favor.
Marcy?
Marcy's in favor.
And Chair will abstain because I wasn't here. But those are approved. Okay, then let's. Is there any correspondence, Harry?
Harry Smith, Town Planner. No new correspondence.
Okay. Well, I think we can bring up the public hearing item, which was the Preston Handler 342 Shore Drive accessory apartment. And do you want to, Evan, you want to pull up your staff recommendation, findings and conditions?
Sure.
This seemed pretty straightforward. No public comments. It's to legalize something that's there, complies with the regulations. So, do any members have any comments? And if not, if someone want to make a motion to approve this application by adopting the findings and conditions in the staff report that Evan has presently projected on the screen in front of us.
Chuck, Fred Russo. Just one quick question.
Sure.
When an item like this comes before the commission, does the zoning enforcement officer go out there just to inspect the property to make sure it is what it is? I'm just curious.
No, I don't think she'll go out and look at this one. Only because there's no building permits that would be pulled a part of this. It's a legalized, or they're legalizing an existing apartment. I think this did come to our attention through enforcement action. That's why Mr. Handler's in front of us today. But I don't know if she actually ever went out there.
The reason why I asked, I'm just curious, and when we do the vote, I'm not to be against it, I'm in favor. But I'm just curious for my own knowledge. You know, when you have a unit that is coming on board being legalized, which I think is a very good thing that they're doing, just to make sure that safety things like windows are the right size and there's two means of egress. That was my concern.
Yeah, Harry Smith, town planner. I mean, the building department will take care of all that. As I believe it would be registered as a dwelling unit when it is not now. So we can double check with them as to what their process would be, because like as Evan says, there would be no actual building permit.
Right.
But I think there's something involved with it coming online, as you say, as a dwelling unit.
I guess my concern was that, and again, I'm just asking, I'm not trying to be negative about this, just to make sure that if someone's going to live in there and it's legalized, and we're going to say it's okay to have it. I'm all in favor of that. I just want to make sure that there's nothing there that might be a flag had it been a newly built apartment, that there's a certain egress size for a window, a certain size for doors. I would just want to make sure that's the safety features are there. We're just not accepting what's there that may not meet the existing code.
Yeah, it's entirely possible something slipped through the cracks and it was permitted to the building department piecemeal as a new toilet or new this or
Right.
So it's it's possible then just a wall went up, those kinds of aspects of the living space may have already been permitted. So we can double check with the building department to make sure all that happened.
Just trying to get some information, that's all.
Sure. No, good point.
Good.
Thanks, Fred. Any other questions, comments from anyone? Not then, does someone want to make a motion to approve the application by adopting the findings and conditions as in the staff report?
Fred Russo will make that motion.
Motion to approve by Fred. Is there a second?
Marcy, a second.
Second by Marcy. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Joe Chadwick?
Joe Chadwick is in favor.
Fred Russo?
Fred Russo is in favor.
Joe Vayuso?
Vayuso in favor.
Marcy Pelusi?
Marcy's in favor.
And chair is also in favor. So that item is approved. Then going to our agenda. By the way, it looks like that was basically it. My understanding is most of the rest of this meeting, we're going to go over proposed regulations under other business. When we get that they were sent out last week, but just to give a heads up to commission members. But running through old business, there's 7 items listed. All of them have the public hearing scheduled for our next meeting on May 16th. And you can see what they are. I think we'll cover those. Will come up at our next meeting. So that brings us into new business, and that was a recent application under 6.8 that's come in, and we would need to set the public hearing for that, and we'll do that consultation with staff and myself. That's items 1 and 2. I think that is it for the items, the specific items on the agenda. And then we get to the other business, which is the discussion of the draft zoning amendments. So, Harry, I'm going to turn this over to you. I think you can call those up and we can start going over those.
Okay. Harry Smith, Town Planner. So I'm going to move this over here. So everyone can still see the screen here. Should be a bunch of words, really. Proposed amendments to the zoning regulations dated April 12th.
No, I mean, I just see a line.
Yes,
Okay.
there's a line.
All right, let me get out of wherever I am and reshare. So how about now?
Yes.
Good. Okay. Good.
They're yeah. I mean, we can't see the full page. We can see the first top third of the page.
Right. That's all because of the. So I'm scrolling down now. So.
Right.
Okay. Great. Alrighty. By way of introduction, I think we talked about this very briefly the last meeting. That so I alluded to the fact that this set of draft regulation amendments was in your packet, and they'll be taking it up at a future meeting. This follows up from the discussion the commission had back at a special workshop in December. We went through a whole issue list, as you may recall, and things that the commission wanted a little more information on, or was a disagreement with how staff suggested they be approached, we've put aside. So we've really only listed here everything the commission basically gave us the green light to go ahead and develop into full-blown draft regulation amendment language. There are a small handful of new items, a couple embedded in this document, and a couple of things I'll just show you as we go through here in sequence. I've organized them numerically by the sections in the regulations, so it's not in the order the issues list was in. But hopefully it's a little more organized for when we take whatever of these. Hopefully, the commission wants to go ahead with them. They're all approved or not. We'll insert them at some point in the zoning regulations themselves, and that'll make it a little easier for us to do that. So just to go back, at the meeting, we had language in here for what was a temporary limited moratorium, you may recall, on residential development going back to 2016. So that's long gone. And I think it was felt that could come right out of the regulations. It was thus redundant language that didn't apply to anything anymore. So we're proposing that whole section be taken away, stricken out. The next section has to do with a state law change. I believe it was from 20. Here. I think this was 2023. It might have been earlier. Actually, it was probably earlier. It's that frankly, municipality was supposed to have had this in place the end of December, or provide a letter to the state saying when the regulation change would be put into effect. So this is a state mandated provision that requires child daycare centers and family child care homes, group child care homes, all is defined in this section, the section of the state statute, to be allowed and treated, I believe, just as a regular single family home is treated in the regulations. There are limitations in the statute about how many kids, for example, can be at a child daycare center and so forth, but municipality is not allowed to have any regulations in addition to what's in the statute. It's my understanding. So we've tweaked the existing definitions we had to comply with the new statutory language. Under the letter we sent to the state, the municipalities was from the first selectman. We have until the end of June to have these in place. So hopefully we can get all these underway and into public hearings so we can meet that time frame. Another thing we discussed was the definition of restaurant. Even though it had been the practice, I think, in the town, the understanding that restaurants were primarily for the sale of foods and beverage as sort of a accessory or, a minor item, particularly alcoholic beverages. We did have an application for a beverage-focused restaurant, if you will, quite a while ago, and we were advised by our town council that the plain reading of our definition of a restaurant did not preclude that. So we talked about the meeting in December, tweaking the language to change that reference to not. Somebody's echoing here. To non-alcoholic beverages, and to also this is language that was in the issues list itself, in referring to the sale of alcoholic beverages for on-site consumption. Reference as how they would be limited in a restaurant to what's allowed by the state on a restaurant liquor permit, which has some requirements about separating out a bar area from food service, where children might be seated, and some other requirements that would really be more conducive to how a restaurant or alcohol is served in a restaurant. So I did throw in here prohibiting alcoholic beverages from being sold in fast food restaurants. I think I dug up the 2008 regulations, which had the definition of fast food restaurant. In that version of the regs, there was no reference to the sale of beverages, alcoholic or not, in there at all. So it was not allowed then. So this would just change it back to what was in place in 2008. And everyone, stop me if people want to talk, questions, whatever, just jump right in. We also have had an issue with site triangle in a couple of occurrences recently, and wanted to get more specific because the question came up, and I think may have come into the commission for interpretation on this, is what is the actual site triangle in terms of what height above the ground should obstructions be limited within. And I went to the town engineer's office to get some technical standards on this, and the magic number is 3.5 feet above ground elevation. So anything 3.5 feet or lower is really invisible to motorists coming up and down out of a driveway, coming down a roadway, etc. We did throw some language in here also about basically what's the maximum height. There really is no number according to the town engineer. It's basically, if you drive down the road, you'll see where trucks, will clip overhanging branches just because they're going down the road at a certain height. So we just left it vague here. Anything low enough to impede the vision of motorists entering or leaving such road or driveway, which, probably more than likely would be already removed just from vehicles going back and forth. So that's language that the town engineer is okay with. The next item was, I pointed out that we have no reference in the regulations to window signs, really. Staff and I think the commission, was in agreement with this, was not proposing to regulate them. We just wanted to include them in the definition of a sign, and to have therefore window signs that are function as a prohibited sign, which are in the regulations as flashing signs, spinning signs, anything that unnecessarily catch attention, which we've had some of in certain locations, prohibited, just like they would be if they were outside a building, because they're basically functioning as a sign in the exterior of a building. So that's what the purpose of this was. As I recall, the commission was fine with that. Questions?
Just as one of the nits I love to pick.
Yeah.
You're using the word you're using the word being defined in the first sentence of the definition. A sign is a sign. A sign includes every sign. So it's just sort of a weird thing for a definition to have that.
That is true. It's existing language. I don't know where that came from, but yes.
It's sort of interesting when this came up. I mean, there are a handful of other comments I have that I have not sent you because, like I said, while I do enjoy picking these nits, day job has been creeping into my life pretty hard lately. So I can't get to this till after 10, and by that point, I'm just drooling on myself. But I did end up going to see what the building code has to say about signs. And this sort of seems like an opportunity for us to fill in the space that the building code leaves behind, because a lot of signs can end up being just windborne hazards. And aside from, along with the sort of visual assault and the order and everything else you want to have to make good zoning, a good zoning context. But I might have a thing or two more to say about this when I finish going through Appendix H of the building code in
Okay.
more detail.
Yeah, feel free to let me know, apart from the meeting too. So, if it's all right with the commission, if there's something that, seems obvious to put in it, we can put in it. If you want to send these to public hearing and then, talk about it at that point, or we can, certainly bring it up in another meeting. Or we can just do it at the public hearing, one or the other. Assuming you guys want to go ahead with this.
Harry?
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I saw, but I mean, there's also like those signs that, are on the sidewalk for what do they call them? They're like the V signs. And I know there's temporary signs for real estate that sometimes go up. And then there's often a lot of advertising when, contractors are working on a job, they'll throw a sign. I don't know if we need to regulate all of that, but I just offer it because I'm not sure this completely describes it. I'd have to read it.
Yeah, the whole signage section has a lot more information, and frankly, regulating and enforcing the sign regulations has not been made a priority, but we're basically reactive in terms of enforcement, and that's common in most communities. But we haven't had a lot of complaints about signage.
Well, I can think of a couple of really ugly signs that have gone up recently, and I won't draw attention to the businesses that put them up. But
yeah, so
I don't know how much, if it's not within the town center, how much space or we have as far as aesthetic of signs. But
you don't really have much on that, but there's forms of signs like feather flags technically are illegal. So there are a number of those around town, even a couple in the town center. And we just, with staffing changes and a bunch of other things going on, we have not taken it upon ourselves to, decide to go out and enforce sign regulations absent some kind of complaint about things. So some of the things you're talking about, like the sandwich board signs, are, I think this maybe some provision for them in the town center. I think they're illegal other places. So
I'm actually thinking of one building sign that has more than just the title, the name. I don't know if it had hours on it or like pictures. It was just very cluttered and distracting. And I felt like they were, trying to put the menu on the sign, for lack of a better word.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you can feel free to, get in touch with Jane Ellis. We can sort of look into any particular sign and see what it, that meets the regs or not. But absent that kind of, specific attention, we haven't gone after, in quotes. Part of it was, we certainly didn't do it during COVID because things were hard enough. So at this point, it was just sort of, this was one way to address one thing.
Yeah, I just think it's a very, very sensitive subject because, there's different people of different taste levels. I remember a time when, the town center was reviewing whether realtors should advertise for listings or, even if it was done tastefully. I mean, I think, there's so many circumstantial and situational things. I don't want to see the signage regulation overly regulated because I don't think we can dictate it, but I don't know the best way to address it personally.
Yeah. I mean, this little step here would not get after the, the sign hanging realtor signs that are illuminated in the windows. It's just things that are like flashing,
Right.
revolving signs, strobe lights, that kind of thing. So you
Yeah,
just can't put those up. I mean, I think there is at least maybe one convenience store in town that's got some of that stuff as attention getters, and you see a lot of examples of it in other communities, East Haven, New Haven, and they can really get out of control. So it was just sort of, let's make sure the prohibited signs can't just sneak in behind a window, and that wouldn't be allowed on the side of a building, for example.
Right. Well, I think it needs to be a balanced, consistent approach across all businesses, like,
Yep.
Maybe we decide to have a fluorescent district. I don't know, but
Yeah.
everybody should have it, or it should be consistent in my mind, however they do it. But when it's one sign that's so differentiated, and the same goes to too much mono sign. I know some communities like, oh, you can only do everything in, forest green because that's part of the town streetscape language. I think that's a little too restrictive.
Yeah, I don't think it's that bad.
I think the balance is between,
Yeah, it's the illuminated, sort of the signs that have lights behind them.
Right.
That's prohibited in the town center area, but other than that,
but some white lit, well done, tasteful lighting, I think could be accomplished if it's, red lights or flat, I think that I guess that's what I'm saying is how do you, I don't want to preclude things either, because I know there's a lot of nighttime activity that, they might want to look at the real estate signs. That's the only thing I'm thinking of, or the menu or whatever it might be that's on the wall. So
yeah. No, there's a lot of standards, I think, in the regs, and frankly, this is just, like I said, the low hanging fruit we're all agreeing on. There's a whole lot of other issues out there.
Right. Well, let's go on. I'll stop.
No. I just want to point out that, we'd like to, as staff, try to get into some of that. And I'm frankly looking at whether we have any funding in the current budget to possibly hire someone to start to look at updating some of the basic standards like parking, signs, maybe lighting. It regulates light sources people don't even use anymore. So these things need updating. Maybe look at section 6.8 again a little bit more. Stormwater. There's new requirements and changes. It really, some of these things just need to be revisited and refreshed because the regs in the version of the zoning regs we have right now go back to when it was done in 2011. So it's getting a little dated.
I understood.
All right. So moving along. Again, you'll see this come up in a couple of different areas. This is the family daycare home. I just sort of put that as a placeholder here. Well, actually, I put it into that list of uses for residential zones. So those went in here. These two are just coming out because they're outdated terminology. Made a little tweaking wording change here to refer, I believe this is a reference to a special exception requirement for all accessory structures, not that just sheds, decks, and garages that are oversized, over 750 feet. And the regulation that it refers to also includes anything over 50 feet in height. So I just wanted to put all that wording here so it's clear and consistent with the special exception criteria section later on in the regs in section 7. I think we talked about this in December too. This came up here as a interpretation question. We had a through lot with basically front yard and the rear yard, both facing a town right of way and town streets, so that the property owner had no backyard really within which to put accessory structure. Was limited to the side yards, which could be pretty narrow and could have setback issues. So this would allow properties, the property owners to basically pick one of their front yards as a location within which they could have accessory structures. They couldn't have them in both, just one. So this is the language we came up with. We should take a look at. So I think it's pretty straightforward, but if anybody has any questions about it, you let me know now, later.
I have a question.
Okay.
So is this saying that if you have a narrow lot and there's no existing attached garage, that you could or couldn't put a garage in the front yard unless it were attached to the building? Because if it were not attached, it would be considered an accessory?
That's not allowed at the moment.
Right. That's the way it is right now. So somebody with a through lot can't put that garage in front of the building, either facing the front yard or the rear yard, which is also facing the street. So you really have two front yards.
Well, I'm thinking of a situation where maybe you can't get to the backyard with the driveway.
Yep.
Well, this isn't about that. This is about
through
lots. Yeah.
I'm just thinking just accessory structure in general. But okay.
Yeah, I think we talked about that in December. My recollection is the consensus was just leave it for now and just deal with the through lots, and maybe we come back to that later. But yeah, I believe we aired that out a little in December. And it's an issue, but I don't know if there was any consensus about how to deal with it, really, that I remember. Maybe I'm wrong, but let me know if I am. Should we go ahead?
Yes.
Okay. This is just a tweak. We've had some people come in for home occupations and they look at the section in the regs concerning home occupations and they see home-based business and they see minor home occupation. Then they see major home occupation, which is in that section of the regs says, what's anything that's not a home-based business or a minor occupation, which basically be anything. However, it's not because major home occupation, as defined in section 2.2, the definition section, is a home-based business, and a home-based business has some limitations that are enumerated in section 2.2. So this is just sort of the addition of a reference back to that. So when somebody's only reading that one section, they're not led to believe that they can do anything. They have to live within what the definition of a home-based business is, which has some limitations. If you have a question, I can put that up here, but I believe we talked about that in December too. That brings us to the center business zone, and I just want to put up a couple of graphics here first, then we get back to this. But I did want to point this out too. I'm sorry I jumped over this. Let me do this first. We've had a couple of issues with utilities, and in a couple of areas where existing properties are below the 100-year flood, Eversource is requiring platforms to be installed so that not only is the equipment above the 100-year flood level, but that their personnel don't need to bring ladders or whatever, that the actual homeowner construct a platform adjacent to the meter or the electrical connection with a staircase. So in some circumstances, or we've had several variance applications for a variance to allow those to be built within setbacks. So one possible solution is to just piggyback on the exemption for sheds that are 200 square feet or smaller, which are allowed to be within the setbacks up to 5 feet from property lines. So this was just a thought we had here. It was not in the issues list in December. We didn't bring it up. It's just sort of something that's come up more pointedly to our attention since then. So I've scribbled some language here that would basically say, except for sheds and utility required service platforms within the 100-year floodplain, all accessory structures must meet side and rear setbacks, blah, blah, blah. Sheds and the platforms noted above of 200 square feet or smaller, 5 feet from property lines. So is this, what do you think of this approach? Does this make some kind of sense? It just sort of, anything really close to the property line could be built. We just need a variance, but it will at least probably cover, 3/4 or more of the situations we've been encountering.
So Harry, this is Massimo speaking.
Hi.
So if Eversource, if they have something going on somebody's property, they're allowed to go there and build some type of structure. Is that what you're saying, on someone else's property? Even
no. On the let's say a homeowner, it's on the homeowner's property, and they're saying, look, to install this service connection here for an accessory apartment, whatever, that connection needs to be above the 100-year flood level, and also you need to install a platform or staircase to allow our personnel to climb up to that installation, which is, could be 10 feet up in the air, depending wherever it is.
How about existing existing areas?
I don't think they're doing that, as far as I know. At least we haven't run into it. We can find out more about that and get back to you, but I haven't heard of that. These are all new connections that are coming through, as far as I know.
Okay.
So I don't know whether the existing service connection, if it's below 100-year flood, for example, is grandfathered and not, getting into that yet. Maybe they will in the future. I don't know, but.
Harry, I like the idea of having our regulations allow things so they don't have to get variances. Particularly, we see a lot of them, which is a suggestion that people applying for a lot of variances that we probably should be looking at our regs. But I didn't quite understand the within the 100-year floodplain limitation, or what's that about?
Well, this would, because that's the situation that's being encountered. That's the reason they're requiring these platforms and staircases for properties, locations that are within the 100-year floodplain, where they're having to elevate the service connection up on the structure to above the 100-year floodplain, so that their personnel are having to somehow, bring ladders or something to get up to it with maybe, a few feet, 8, 10 feet, whatever, off the ground. I don't know what it would be.
Okay, so it's a flood it's triggered. That's what's triggering.
That's what's triggering the requirement by Eversource, right?
Okay.
Right.
But do we really want open-ended ladders at platforms, just available for people to climb up? I mean, it seems like it's
well, it can still gate it. I mean, I don't know. This is what they're requiring, so it's on private property. It's
well,
not.
That's what I'm saying. So you have a structure that they moved up. They've got to have the platform 10 feet off the ground. You have a highlight. I mean, are they going to do a ladder with rails so that people can? I just see it as a nuisance. I mean, we don't require utility workers climb up and bring their own ladders to climb up the pole. Why wouldn't they be required to bring a freestanding ladder to address?
Well, this doesn't require it. It's just dealing with what Eversource is requiring. So basically, these things are being built right now because Eversource is making people build them.
Yeah, they won't allow them to have electricity without these. And
I understand raising the platforms. It's the ladder and the code and the safety relative to that I'm not sure I'm convinced has been thought out properly.
Well, I mean, I think it needs to comply with the building codes. My understanding is they need building permits for these things.
Right. So I mean, I think for a while there was something that for like second story apartments, they in the center you had to do steel graded stairs, and they were trying to get away from deck stairs going upstairs. I think.
I don't know. I don't know if there's any kind of requirement in our regs about that, but
there was something where they had to do steel stairs if it was like an open stair or not covered. I forget what it was, but it was related to like second floor apartment access from the exterior as opposed to.
Yeah, it sounds more like a building code requirement than it's nothing. And I know of zoning regs.
I would think this needs to meet building code requirements, no?
Yeah, but we can't, get into that in the zoning regs. But yeah, we need to, if it's I believe they require building permits. So.
Oh, the platforms do?
Oh, yes.
Right, well,
that's why. Otherwise, it'd be exempt. It wouldn't be a structure. We wouldn't even worry about it being in the setback. But because it requires a building permit, it's a structure. It has to stay out of the setbacks.
Okay. Yeah. So I mean, as long. Okay.
And I just like to prevent the freedom for them to go and like if we pass this on the regs, would they be able to have the freedom to go into existing properties and change the whole structure of somebody's yard? Look, I dealt with whatever source. They're ruthless. They chop down trees they weren't supposed to chop down. I mean, I could have took it to a whole nother level. They didn't quite care. They weren't very honest. They weren't very, considerate to, the neighbors. And I just think, I just would rather not give them that type of, if this is for new structures, and that's the only way they could get electricity put to those structures or maintain a certain type of flood problem with those structures is fine. But would it prevent them from just saying, hey, you know what, this is really simple. Let's do this where, everywhere where we have, our equipment and just not really have to worry about what the residents in this town even think about, them doing that process. Again, I do understand they have to do what they got to do, to protect the flood zone there and make sure that the structure is fine. But, would it be easier for them and would they just not have any consideration for other people that have existing, lots that they have easements on, and do what they need and just do that because it's simpler for them, and, that's just my concern for, the existing properties.
Yeah. I mean, I think the only reason they'd have to move the connection up above grade level to the point where, their personnel can't deal with it from the ground level would be because of a floodplain situation. And that would put the language limiting this to within the 100-year floodplain for some of the reasons you talked about. And, Marcy raised good points. We can talk to the building department. I'm almost 100% sure it's going to require a building permit. And again, we're just sort of reacting to whatever source is making people do. We're trying to make it a little less difficult for them to do what they need to do.
If I could throw in my 2 cents worth of nitpicking on this, if you're going to work on a live electrical service, the electrical code requires that you have 3 feet clear in front of the live electrical service.
Yeah.
So to do that, you need a platform. They also require that you have a means of access to it that is not a ladder. If something bad happens, you want to get up there and perform a rescue. So that's why you end up with stairs. So you end up with a platform and stairs to get up to the service. That's not hard, for me to accept. My only question is this required to be under a roof? Because if it's not required to be under a roof, we could spring for an extra bullet point or an extra number and just describe a utility platform and take it out of sheds and leave sheds be sheds because sheds have roofs over them. And if it's a utility platform without a roof, that's what it is. It's described as a discrete thing.
Well, it still would be a structure, so it still have to stay out of the setbacks unless you made a provision for it.
True, but it's within this. It's within the family of stuff. It's just sheds have roofs, and I don't want to see that get bollocksed up with somebody else's interpretation of, it's like, oh my God, now we got to put a roof over this thing, or
no, it's not. It's not.
Here, then we can.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, wording wise. Yeah.
So
we can
just separate.
Maybe. Yeah, what I could do is sort of repeat the language so it's a whole separate paragraph and it just says the same thing, but it doesn't use the word sheds. It just says utility requires blah, 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 blah. Yeah. It says all the same wording instead of saying it sheds and, would that kind of distinguish it enough?
Yeah, because you may end up with more criteria for a utility required platform that could further confound the shed issue.
Yep, I see what you're saying. So I'll just make it another number or something under 3AB and separate it out from sheds. It will be treated just the same way, but just a separation.
Yeah.
Okay, we can do that. All right, any more on this one? Okay. So we'll put that in. That's not in here now, and then to get back, I just wanted to, before we did the BC zone, Oh God, where is it? There we are. Okay, so let's start with this. Just wanted to show a graphic of where this is because I forget myself. So we're talking about opposite the town green, all those large buildings basically running from, I believe, right here. There's the bank here, Bank of what is this bank? The bank with the big lights that are illegal, frankly.
Wells Fargo.
Wells Fargo, thank you. Then you got a little, it's an insurance building. This used to be, I think, the phone company. And then you've got a couple buildings here, and I'll zoom in on these with another graphic. But so you've got Laurel Street, police station, community dining room, all the way down the intersection with Harris Avenue, down at the bottom of the hill there. Rose Street, there's a couple properties the other side of Rose Street. Can't remember where the eye doctor, the dentist, one of these is that. Frankly, I did not realize these were in it. But I think they're just either single family uses or, small businesses or something. It's a couple of different things in there. This is the Rose Hill Apartments, which I've got to take a look at. And then a lot of these are apartments and single family homes. There's a couple of businesses in here too. Park Place. This is the municipal parking lot. Runs behind some of the businesses on Main Street. The old card shop and the parking lot behind it. Post office down here. And then Hillside Avenue. And there's a few buildings on Main Street. A couple things on the right side of Hillside Avenue. So this is what we're talking about. I also, this is from the town's GIS. Here's the outline of the BC zone again in pencil. We have another overlay zone here, which is this thing we adopted a few years ago called the Main Streets Overlay District. So it runs further down Main Street, further down here, and down Montaouise. But the part that's in the BC zone is this part here, which has, again, the bank. I think there's an investment company, insurance company or something. Well, actually, that's the old the phone company thing. And then you got the insurance, something. Then you're getting into the building where Archie Moore's is and the art gallery. And the building where I think that home decor center and G Cafe. And then you've got the other buildings on Main Street here. Some of those have apartments above them, some don't. And I did this to do it as sort of analysis of, well, if we drop the density, which is what we were talking about in December, the BC zone, which provides for just over 30 dwelling units an acre, which is a lot more than the incentive housing zone at 20, which is basically the limit any other part of town for residential density. And that's the level of density out at Summit Place across from McDonald's, where Big Leotti has been building those multifamily housing structures. And it's basically been the limit the commission's been using for the planned development districts you've been approving with multifamily housing, such as the whole Bob Smith project out near exit 55. And I think that was actually less than 20 units. I can't remember. A part of it might be over. But it's generally been the rule of thumb. So my concern, and we talked about this in December, was there's a lot of zoning and development density potentially available in the BC zone. And there was agreement on, well, let's limit that for now and think about what the town might want there rather than allow this incredible density potential so anybody could come in and basically knock down some of these existing structures and buildings and assemble things and really change what the area looks like without a whole lot of control on the part of the town or commission. So I did, getting back to what we proposed, I don't know if we came up with a number. I think we maybe thought about it. What I put here was the figure that's from the R2 district, which is the maximum allowed density in any other standard residential zones in town. So in the R1, that was up a few years ago to 6,000. 4,000 is the lowest. As you're going out to the less dense districts, you're getting higher, like 15,000 square feet, and so forth. So this would provide density of now it gets to the R2 zone for the BC zone. Now we'll get back to the graphic, which is here. So recognizing that, in some of these buildings, there are apartments in the upper floors that where the density is a lot higher than the 4,000 square feet per unit in the R2 zone. So I looked at coming up with a different density level for this area, which is basically all the larger buildings along Main Street. So I did an analysis a little bit. Where is that graph? Right here. I apologize, it's all handwritten. I haven't a chance to type it up, but I went through all those buildings fronting Main Street and tried to figure out how big they were and how many dwelling units were in them, and whether they met or exceeded or were under that sort of 20 unit limit, which seemed to be, what we've been using the rest of town. So I just went through them here. I can sort of flip back and forth because I've this graphic here. It's over here. I'll take it back. I thought I had the numbers on it. Something. So I don't have individually numbered, but I'll just run through it quickly. Move that over. So with this particular building here, it's got large lot area. It's got 14 dwelling units per acre with 10 apartments in it. So the lot area per dwelling unit is 3,000. And so forth down the list here. Bear with me for a minute here. Okay. So all these came out with density levels of less than 20 dwelling units an acre, except for two. And those two are, one of them's right here. And one is the 978 1004 Main Street, which is the where Archie Moore's is. So that came out with 45 dwelling units an acre, which is a lot higher. But I did a little bit of research and found out that that particular property has a variance to allow it to build to that density level. And somebody may, tell me if I'm wrong about this, but I don't know if that was the site of the Castellan Bakery. So I think there may have been some special considerations for that. I'm not sure. But anyway, back in the archives here is a variance to allow them to have exactly the density they have there. The other building that was higher at 38 was this tiny, tiny little lot of just over 1,000 square feet. And it had 3 apartment units on the top floor, which brought it up to 38, an equivalent of 38 units an acre if it had an acre. But it's already not conforming. It's been there for years. And I don't know, frankly, I don't think it's appropriate to, have that be the standard when everything else meets the 20. So I just picked that as a number for now, and we can talk about that, and you can set it at whatever you want. But hopefully that was, sorry to be a little muddled, but does that approach, let me put, maybe this graphic is the best one to put up. Does that kind of general approach make any sense to folks? And I think the idea was to, kind of, as I said, at least establish some reasonable limits. I'll need to go back through the BC zone a little more in detail and make sure there aren't a lot of properties that end up becoming non-conforming because of this, because we don't want that. But there may be a couple outliers, and I'll look at the Rose Hill apartments, which would certainly probably be over that limit. And, you know, we can talk about this further, but the idea was to kind of create some kind of reduced density. People want to come in and propose something, then the commission would basically be in the driver's seat to decide what you wanted. It wouldn't stop someone from coming in and proposing a PDD, for example. So what are your thoughts?
Fred Russo says, I think you know best.
I don't know about that, but thank you.
You see it every day, Harry. I mean, we're here, once or twice a month. You get all the stuff at your desk. I think that you have probably the best handle on something like this.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, just trying to establish it as sort of a placeholder, and then we'll need to evaluate it more, and gives a chance for the commission to really think, well, what do you want this area to look like? Like way back, the idea when zoning went in, this would be a very dense Branford downtown, and this was even before I think Rose Street went all the way through. Which I understand happened at some point since zoning regulations went in. So, any other thoughts?
It's an interesting problem because when you're looking at things from a map, you're looking at this sort of perimeter and a chunk of space.
Yeah.
When you walk through there, the reality of Main Street is so much different than the characteristics of Harrison or Park Place or Hillside Avenue.
Exactly.
And Main Street is Main Street. And it really is not as good as Main Street with a little taller buildings, a little more, sort of village center density. And the other streets are just, exquisitely more residential. And yeah, it would be a shame to see them get, sort of gobbled up into some kind of mega block. But there is, sort of the question of density for the entire BC thing, and the overlay district might need a little more permission for density uniformly. But BC, I think, should probably be as less dense as we could probably afford. I mean, the less density in BC overall is good. The more density in the overlay district is good.
Yeah, and that's why I tried to break it up into two different approaches, one for the BC outside of the overlay and one for that overlay along Main Street for now. Yeah.
Because it really is the sort of characteristic of a more urban experience is, living in maybe not a huge place, but you step out of your apartment into the downtown, and there's an awful lot of appeal for that. Having walked my dog there at every time of the day and night, it's always interesting to see the activity on Main Street compared to the activity on side streets. Side streets are always nice and calm and quiet. Always stuff going on in town, and you really want stuff going on in town. And that density is to my mind a good thing on town, not so much on the side streets.
Okay. So anything else? It sounds like this kind of works for now. Want to think about it some more, or can we move on?
I mean, ultimately what we're looking for is all of these things that Harry's going through. We're going to ask, should we bring them to public hearing? I mean, we could deny them, we could tweak them at the public hearing. So that's what that's the ultimate question here. Yeah, Harry, you've identified the main things. On the one hand, it's the vulnerability because of the high density on the side streets to allow some sort of as of right development that doesn't fit in. On the other hand, you don't want to make things non-conforming. So I'd be curious as to where the apartments, how they fill out when you said you hadn't looked at those, but
yeah.
But I think it's probably a sound concept. It doesn't mean.
Okay.
I think we need to have some philosophical discussion about, the long range development of the center as a whole. I think this is a great start. And, I think it's one type of analysis. I really don't, I think you were offering the 20 units as a point of comparison, but I think we really need to look at other small, not cities, but, as Branford becomes more urban, how do we want to create an environment that's, economically vibrant? And I think that wants to happen from the, Main Street, Montauk areas, not to, and what that region is. And yeah, there's always these side streets that are residentials in cities, but, if you think about how cities develop, what I think density is a critical component to encourage, that. And I think that has to be balanced with the economic demand. I know, for years it was how to get people back to the downtown. I don't want to see the downtown not thrive because it has a lot of character and charm, and I think that's really important to maintain. I'm just not sure the best way to, I think the green goes a long way. That's where our public, it's a gem for sure, and I think we need to allow some gradual growth emanating from the center to allow that. And it might make, whether that happens down Harrison or Park or down Church Street, because we have the rec center over there at South Main. Main and South Main I think are two great ways to wrap what's going on the green, and Montauk. And I think that I can almost see that Main Street overlay extending on those other three sides of the triangle to encourage it. I just don't know if the economic are there to, really have enough vibrancy with retail and shops and so forth to really continue to promote what we already have on that Main Street area. So.
Yeah, I think that all makes sense to me. That's what my thinking was too. One of the things that, could be looked at is a transition period or something where, try to encourage retention of some of the historic architecture along some of the side streets, but look at the potential for additional development behind them because, for example, between Harrison and Park Place, there's a lot of room behind some of those properties. It's in narrow lots. Frankly, it's a little bit wasted. And could it be combined and you do something that, fits in, provides additional housing and some more, economic development potential, or just simply people that would use the businesses and the restaurants on Main Street more, or, its outgrowth. And that wouldn't really detract from what it looks like in the charm, that the side streets have right now. So.
Well, I think if we can make those side streets as charming as Main Street and still be vibrant, that would be a home run. And I'm not sure.
Maybe that happens in the future too. It could be, where it sort of develops over time. And what do you want to do now? What do you want to do near term and then long term?
Well, yeah, that's kind of what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. Yeah. All right. So it sounds like this is a workable thing for now, basically. Okay. All right. I will move on then. So technically, this would really do the job. And I've got some language further on that basically puts the 20 dwelling unit per acre level for the Main Street overlay district part of the BC. So I'll show you that when we get there. We've had several issues with the need for small amounts of impervious surface like concrete pads for all kinds of ancillary equipment for tenant spaces in the industrial zone, particularly the pre-existing larger buildings, a lot of them built as warehouses and so forth, and been used for all kinds of purposes now. Those buildings and sites were really developed at a impervious surface coverage ratio of 75%. The current limit's less, it's only 60%. So these are all non-conforming situations largely. We've had to do all kinds of machinations to try and accommodate biotechnology high-tech tenants that needed nitrogen cooling equipment or whatever the heck it was outside the tenant space. And this would provide for exceptions for these concrete pads from the impervious surface area ratio limit. It would allow it on sort of a sequential, like a basis where, let's say, a tenant needs one up to 200 square feet for their use. The tenant further down the building needs another one. Well, that's exempt also. There'd really be no necessary limit on these small pads outside of the tenant spaces. And it would be regardless of the status of the property is non-conforming with respect. So if you were over the 60% limit, you could still get this exception. And we're make life a lot easier for us and for a lot of the tenants moving into some of these spaces that needs this kind of equipment, because it's just part of how things are need to be done these days. So I think we talked about this December. We didn't have the wording put together, and maybe it needs a little tweaking, but we thought here pretty much did the job, even though it's not necessarily as straightforward as maybe it could be.
Excuse me, Harry, weren't these buildings generally built before zoning? Or
some of them were, some of them were built after. So I think some of them were built in this, a lot of them built in the 60s. So some might have predated 56.
Well, I'm just thinking of, like, say, Business Park, it's got beautiful wide roadways. There's lots of grass along that center core, and then there's a lot of parking needs. And I don't know what the right percentage is, but, I think it was well designed, and it seems to, like, we came back after the fact and put this limit to 60% for other goals, which, I think this is, a very interesting, example of what happens when we try to do things retro to, zoning has evolved, and we're trying to re-guide it in some ways, which is, this is an example of. And, I guess.
Yeah, we're just trying to give an out, basically, so these people don't need to go get variances and things.
I think we tried to re-guide, and we went too far in one direction, and now we're coming back, which is, it's kind of what the point is. It's
okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're in favor of this? I think it sounds like okay.
Yeah.
I think it's necessary. I think it's a consequence of trying to adapt too far, too extreme, and then we need to make, maybe changes, smaller changes. It's hard to do blanket kind of regulations. That's what I'm hearing overall.
Yeah. No, I remember when it was adopted. There was a big push on stormwater and treating stormwater, and how a lot of pollution happens because of pervious surface. And one of the efforts was going forward, the regulations, it was reduced. It was from whatever it was, 0.8 or 0.75 down to 0.6.
Which is great. I don't disagree about the whole stormwater thing, but if they were there and then the regulation happened, I'm not sure the best way to mitigate those circumstances. It's like, I think things are better moving forward. If you like that, moving forward to do it better than to try to retroactively, because we're doing a lot of patching, I guess is what I'm saying.
One way to mitigate is by adopting this amendment. So here we go.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Good job.
No, I think what I kind of getting out of this too is, we try to look at unintended consequences of changes in the regulations, and maybe and I think years ago when the change was adopted, there weren't as many requirements for these kinds of facilities outside of tenant spaces, but as there's more and more, this is some small biotech things going in, and there's some high-tech equipment that can't be accommodated within a building. So we're just running into a lot of this. And generators, there's been a whole spate of people wanting generators, of course, since some of the storm events and so forth that have happened.
Yeah, well, exactly. I'm just.
No, you're right. I agree.
I'm sort of clarifying that it's not an exact science, and we're doing the best we can to find a middle ground. Right?
Yep, exactly.
Okay, we're on page 416 here now. So.
All right, moving ahead here. So
they would only request that we lose the term pre-existing. I would plead with you, we use the term pre-existing.
So I'm missing something. Do you want
For
you
existing,
with the line?
for existing industrially developed properties.
That would be pre-existing as of the date of that regulation. So something coming in new would have to comply with a 60% limit.
Right, but for existing, I don't know, just pre-existing is just one of the weirdest words. I'm sorry, we're wasting time.
No, you bring up point though. I mean, I'll look at that again.
Does anyone know why we have an echo?
I don't know. Unless somebody's listening to it with a microphone at the same time on a service.
I think it's Joe Vaisa.
Who might be listening to it on BCTV or something.
I think if Fred can mute, might be his.
All right, I'm gonna keep going on. It's not too bad, and maybe it'll go away. So this is for the 510.F is part of the Main Street Overlay District. So this would set the density level there at 20. And I put this in quotes just to give a comparison. This wouldn't be the wording, but 31 is about the existing density level in the BC. So this would read for this district is 20, assuming you're okay with this, dwelling units per acre. So everything else in the highlighted would go away. That was just for explanation purposes. The next one would drop the required parking for multifamily dwellings for 2+ bedrooms from 2.5 to 2. And the reason for that is there was a state law passed that mandated parking levels, and we meet the state law for efficiencies in 1 bedrooms, but a requirement for 2+ bedrooms is over what the state says it should be. There was an opt-out provision in that regulation, and we talked about that. And I think the consensus of the commission was to just leave it the way it is now. And you could also opt out if you wanted in the future and set your own number, whatever you might want. But for now, we'd leave it at the state. But what's happening is people looking at our regs, seeing the 2.5, they're designing the sites for 2.5. And we come and tell them, well, you really don't need all the spaces because the state law trumps our regulations. And it says you only need 2 for the larger number of bedroom dwelling units. So this would make it match the state law. And you could always opt out in the future unless the law is changed, and change it if you wanted to. Some of these are just little cleanups here. We don't have the Stony Creek Village District referred to in this section of the regs, so this would add that. And prohibit internally lit signs down there, as well as the Town Center Village District. And with respect to the window signs, this would allow them as signs, allow in all zones with no permit required, as long as they were not on the list of prohibited types of signs. And we added a section here for gateway signage. I think at the TOD study going back maybe 6-7 years now, maybe a little bit more, we talked about having sort of a wayfinding signage program. There's that sort of convoluted this way sign near the train station with everyone seems to have a little blue arrow sign pointed different directions. And there is a proto project to look at adding some wayfinding signage around town. And this will provide for, doing that installation in a way that's compliant with the zoning regulations. So when we get there at some point, I'm going to keep going unless anybody jumps in with comments. So 6.8, this would make it pointedly clear that you need a special exception per section 6.8. There are a couple of sections buried in the section already that say that. but this would say it up front, so there's just no question about it. And that was lost somehow when the new set of regulations were created in 2011. That's upfront identification that you need a special exception for all these activities. And there was a whole list of exclusions that wouldn't affect those. We had talked in December about, I was proposing eliminating rock slopes. And after a lot of discussion, I think consensus of the commission was to keep them in, but to address some of the concerns I brought up that we've been experiencing in a couple of sites with respect to not really knowing when these projects are being approved, whether the rock you're talking about was really going to be stable and be able to be certified as creating a stable slope by a licensed professional engineer, which is a requirement for the rock slope, so that it's not just sloughing off as some kind of sedimentary rock. I mean, you can look at, for example, the one behind Aldi's and Chase Bank. It's not a very tall slope, but it is supposed to be a rock slope. They didn't want to do a retaining wall. It was a way for them to cut costs. And we've never gotten that rock slope certified despite several attempts to get them to do it, which means that final COs for that property development have never been issued. They are operating under temporary COs, which is problematic for a lot of reasons. So this additional language is intended to sort of up the requirements and say, all right, we need evidence provided to the satisfaction of a registered professional engineer licensed in Connecticut, specializing in geotechnical engineering, either employed by the town or working as a consultant under contract with the town. So there are provisions further in this set of amendments that would give the commission and staff the ability to hire outside consultants, like we hire traffic consultants to review traffic studies, to do this kind of thing, because we don't have geotechnical engineering expertise in-house. Our town engineer does not have that expertise and has been clear about that. So that would be a way to get a little more of a guarantee that the material to be exposed is going to be solid rock. That's the best that really I could come up with. Did throw, and this is brand new, so this wasn't talked about in December, was trying to treat rock slopes like retaining walls are treated now. There is an 8-foot height limitation on retaining walls. You can have a 4-foot wide terrace, then you have another 8-foot retaining wall. But right now, there's no limitation on the height of rock slopes. So you have situations of possible like that developed at 250 North Main Street, that kind of quarry area, if you will, was going to be the site of, I guess the rumors were, an LA Fitness. It's next to Clancy's Funeral Home's new site. So you've got some rock slopes there that go up, I think, 18 feet, maybe 20 feet, which is pretty high. So it's a question of how much you want to control or regulate terrain alteration. I mean, I think having the 4-foot separation for retaining walls is a provision that's already in the regulations, that allows, you could have a stepped approach and have, a pretty significant degree of height difference, but you have to spread it out. There's some limitation on it. So that was something I just threw in here and see what you guys think about it. Also, I'll get there. Let's see. Flip here to make sure I'm not missing something. Okay. Maybe right here, flip to another document. It's this one. Okay, here we go. This might look familiar because we came to you, staff did, with an interpretation question a while ago, maybe a couple meetings ago. It's not too long ago, about retaining walls. And there was a question of And I don't know, Evan, maybe you can jump in a little if you are still following along. We had a question of whether the way the current wording refers to that, if a retaining wall is less than 3 feet, does it need to be set back the minimum of 6 feet from any parking space, or a distance equal at least to the height of the wall from the wall property lines. I think the interpretation has been that for anything over 3 feet in height, which is the requirement limit for something that does not need a building permit, that anything less than that in height didn't need to be set back this distance. So I think the original interpretation decision here back in 2015 also included a discussion about the desirability of putting this little bit of wording in here to clarify that. That never happened because of a variety of factors, staff turnover, I think the Costco application was being considered at that time. But when this came back up again, we basically came to the commission and said, does the commission want to re-verify this interpretation? And I believe the commission did. And we talked about adding this piece of language in. And I did not get that in the draft, but I just wanted to bring it to your attention. And if you're okay with it, we will put it in the draft.
Yes.
Could I ask a question?
Sure.
I mean, shouldn't the 3 foot, I mean, how does that relate relative to property lines? Is there something in there that says that the retaining wall has to be set back equal distance to the height of the property line, so you don't get 3 foot walls on property lines? But instead that it's set back 3 feet off the property line or 4 feet, you know?
Yeah, that's exactly what the regulation is.
It is, okay, good. I just want to make sure that this wasn't.
Yeah, this is just another provision, not that one.
Specific to parking, I understand.
Right, exactly.
Essentially, the higher the wall, the farther it has to be from the property line, unless it's under 3 feet.
But 3 feet can't be on the property line. Right.
I mean, right up to the property line, yes.
I think we need to set back, because I know a specific project where the buildings pre-state zoning, I won't do names, but walls were built on property lines and it created undermining on foundations, and it's a hot mess because the wall wasn't set back off the property line.
Well, and that contradicts this ruling then, right?
Yeah, I think you could have a wall right at the property line as long as it's under 6 feet. It's the retaining wall part of it. So,
yeah.
You're okay with a wall? I mean, because that's what we've been doing, fences and walls.
It's a 3 foot retaining wall on the property line that actually encroached over the property line, that, which, because they were, the house, it was in a residential zone, the house was being raised, and it's a huge legal battle right now with wetlands.
Well, yeah, that's a whole different kettle of fish. But I mean, back in 2015, again, we brought this to your attention a couple of months or so ago. I think the commission agreed that if the wall was less than 3 feet, it wasn't a retaining wall, even if it did retain earth behind it. And then no setbacks were required. It's just like a wall that has some earth behind it, basically, because it's so low. At least that's been what.
So picture somebody putting a 3 foot wall on a property line where somebody's parking. Your door is going to hit that wall if it's right on the property line. If the parking spot is, I mean, I just think.
Well, I mean, there could be anything.
Now that I have this, that I'm working on this situation, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, but there could be a fence there right in the property line. Could be 6 feet. The door could hit that. Could hit a wall that's up to 6 feet. So it wouldn't take care of that per se. Would just, if there's earth behind it, it would. But I mean, this has been the way I understand we've been applying the requirement since 2015 at least. So this isn't new. It just sort of enshrines what's been happening.
I mean, I would maybe propose having the height of the wall set back equally off the property line, and then, if if there's a reason to have it on, closer, say, with more than 3 feet on the property line, to have it go to ZBA or get a variance or something, so that they can look at it at case by case basis.
Well, we're interested in what the whole commission thinks. So why don't you guys tell us what you want to do? I mean, my suggestion would be, if that's the consensus, then we just sort of take this away for now and just revisit the issue later.
Harry, Fred Russo.
Yeah.
I think we're overthinking this. It's, if you said it already, whether it's a fence, a shrub, or a wall, it really is all the same thing. I don't see, why it's going to require all this additional. I think layers of bureaucracy for no good reason. Worrying about someone opening a door against a wall or a fence, I don't know. They just don't know how to park a car, maybe. But this seems like a reasonable thing to me. I don't see why we should make it more complicated than it really is. But that's my opinion.
Yeah, this is the opinion we affirmed in 2015, presumably based on certain, real life stuff. We did it again last year, so I'm good with it. Other members' thoughts? Joe Chadwick.
Sorry about the unmute. I am not sure exactly what the need to regulate this is in terms of zoning. If someone wants to build a retaining wall on a property line, there would have to be some sort of formalized agreement with the adjoining property owner, because when you dig a hole, you're going to have an angle of repose of soil that is going to extend over into the neighbor's yard. And without that agreement, you're not going to dig that hole. In a more urban situation, you would still have to get some sort of agreement and maybe drive sheet pile or something on the property line. But, I'm sort of lost on the necessity for it.
So would you agree to keep the language in, or
yeah, I could see keeping the language in. I mean, I'm just struggling to find a causality for where all this is going. But a 6 foot, anything over 3 feet with a 6 foot space distance to the parking space, yeah, that's fine. It gives you some room to plant stuff. It gives you some space to breathe around the car. I mean, that's fine. The relationship to the property line, that's a whole different story. That's a land use agreement that we don't necessarily want to get into, do we?
Thanks, Joe. Joe Vayuzzo, any thoughts?
Harry, could you unmute him?
Let me see if I can get down to him.
You are unmuted.
Okay.
Yeah, there he is.
No, I'm unmuted. Sorry. I think I agree with you guys about keeping this the way it's been since 2015. It's a 3 foot or under wall, and I think the bureaucracy of doing something that 3 feet and under is a little bit much. I think we should just keep it as it is.
Thanks, Joe.
I think my concern is less about how far, about doubling the setback versus the height than it is being on the property line. As a built structure, I mean, any accessory structure, etc., has to be 5 feet off the property line. I don't know. I have a specific situation that I see the issue with it, so that's why I'm bringing it up. I didn't have that in 2015. as a point of reference. Now I have a completely different point of reference. So, it's a big legal battle going on right now. And it's, part of it is that the homeowner didn't get permission from the neighbors to encroach on their property, to do the foundations, to do the wall. And if they weren't allowed to put the wall on the property line to begin with, then you would have some of that, discontent between neighbors. So
they never got a promotion. That particular situation, there was no approval given for them to do what they did.
Well, that's another whole level.
But they went ahead and did it without any approval. So
yeah. So okay, so the case that I'm talking about.
Yeah, they trespassed as well.
Yeah.
Just Massimo, did you have any thoughts?
No, I mean, I'm just thinking about it in my point of view. Like if I wanted to put a wall up on my property line, as long as I don't encroach the neighbor's property, I think I should be able to put a wall up. So I look at it in that sense, and I'd like to be able to keep it the same for now. Thank you.
Okay, so I will take it that we should go ahead with this, and I will move on in the interest of time. So that brings us down to drainage and stormwater. We've been putting semi-routinely conditions on approvals at the suggestion of the town engineer's office regarding maintaining features of stormwater systems such as infiltration units underground, these cyclonic separators that sort of spin the stormwater and get the sediment out, and requiring things like following the manufacturer's suggested or recommended provisions for maintenance of these elements, cleaning them out and so forth, and establishing who is responsible for implementing the plan. If it's in, what development is the property owner, is it a homeowner association who is supposed to do it? And there's some tweaking to some of the existing wording. So everything is not underlined, it's existing. So there's wording about all on-site facilities should be properly maintained, so they'll become nuisances. But also adding in a compliance with the approved stormwater maintenance plan, which is required to be submitted as part of approval applications. And then requiring, submittal of records of all their maintenance activities in compliance with, just getting specific about what are they complying with. It's a stormwater maintenance plan they submit. If they're, for example, out of the subdivisions, for example, like say 175 Cherry Hill Road, there is a provision for a very large detention basin on a slope. As part of that approval, there was a requirement for an easement to the town so that it would allow the town, if there was an occasion that required this, the town to get in there and inspect the stormwater management system, and to see if anything's about it needs to be maintained. If the town engineer recommended to the commission, you could also require the easement to allow, but not require, the town to undertake any emergency maintenance. For example, this pretty large detention basin has this kind of easement language in it, so that if a situation develops that would involve the potential for the side slope holding the detention basin together, washing out, the town could go in there and do the work needed to stabilize the situation, and then recover costs from the entity responsible for implementing that, whether it's a homeowner situation, a homeowner association, or a private property owner. So we've been providing these conditions basically on approvals, and this would enshrine this into the regulations.
Eric?
Yeah.
Does it make sense to add also for water quality basins as a stormwater detention style?
Yeah, so that would be part of it's considered to be part of the stormwater system. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
I didn't specifically mention, I would like to encourage more water quality systems as opposed to open riprap slopes in general. And I don't know that if this does that or if this is the place to discuss it, but I think there's, that's a best management practice that I think is more environmentally appropriate.
Yeah, and I could probably put in here, I can put a reference in water quality features just to make it explicit, if you like. And, I think that's something is, in part two of this is something we're going to need to revisit the stormwater regulations in the future anyway.
Yeah, I mean, water quality basins and that type of drainage has been around for a long time. And a lot of reasons why they fail, especially the planted versions, is because there's not a good management plan. And, I hate to see, all that work to have a more ecologically natural approach be superseded because of ease of maintenance and so forth. And oftentimes that's why they go to the Coltech units, they go to like the riprap slope and so forth. And, I don't mind the Coltech units, but I'd much rather see, a water quality area that's planted and natural than a riprap slope with a fence around it, especially, residential areas, for example. So I just think that's important environmentally to have the regs encourage it and, and all the appropriate, what you've done here for the maintenance. I think that's great.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, good.
Harry, just a question. It says all projects. Does that mean like a single family dwelling? I don't think so. But
no, it's only when this comes into play, and I'll have to go back and find when the threshold is, but it's not every single thing that's built or done. It's basically things that require a site plan. So that's when all the Section 6 standards come into play.
What about accessory apartments or, single and, the whole?
Yeah, but we'll have to look at that, but I think there's a threshold in there of, for example, for a single family apartment, you're putting maybe a parking space or two. I don't think that really kicks in the requirement for a stormwater management plan. It's like how much pavement you're creating. And I'll go back and double check that though, in terms of what situations come under the reg and what things don't.
Well, I'm thinking of in terms of residential applications when we're seeing a new subdivision and they propose, a large, more of a commercial looking retention area. I would like to avoid that, in the future. I don't know if the regs could encourage that, but, it's one thing if it's part of a shopping center and it's something that is, not seen and obvious, but when it's in a neighborhood with children running around, I think they can become a bit dangerous, especially, when you look at some of the volumes that they have of water that they have to support.
Yeah, which is only getting higher too, so it's another factor. Okay. Alrighty. So that takes us down to this is just a little detail. Since the 10-foot paved apron extending back from the edge of pavement 10 feet into the private property provision was put in the regs around, I guess, 2011. That was under a different town engineer, and they've reevaluated those standards, and they've been requiring 2 feet, not 10 feet. So this would line it up with the engineering department standards for how far back from the edge of pavement you need to pave driveway apron. And it has provision here for any alternative distance established in the future under the standard town details of the Branford Engineering Department. So it just syncs it up. So right now I've had a couple situations where they say 2, our zoning regs say 10, and property owner has to do 10 because they're kind of caught in between.
Harry, I see this a lot with driveway aprons where they want to put in, like a Belgian block apron and it doesn't conform. And,
right.
I think 10 and again in a commercial zone it might make perfect sense, but in a smaller side street residential zone where they're trying to put a Belgian block apron or something, it's excessive.
Yeah, we should be dovetailing off what the engineering department wants anyway, so it's an engineering issue really.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so this is I talked about before. I think we're getting back to retaining walls, 8 feet in height is measured from the top of the footing to the top of the should be wall, so keep the word wall. This other provision here, unless modified by the commission after consultation with the town engineer, and Chuck, jump in here if I'm saying anything that's not really correct legally, but my understanding is that this runs afoul of what's called the McKenzie decision, which basically, in a case that had a provision somewhat like this for a standard in a zoning regulation, found that the zoning regulations inappropriately were allowing the zoning commission, to modify the zoning regulations when that is really the purview of the zoning board of appeals through the variance process. So there've been, I think, a subsequent court case, but my sort of layman's idea or understanding of that is, if you're going to have a modification provision in the zoning regulations regarding a requirement, then you really need very specific criteria that would need to be addressed. Like, our situation A, here's the standard. Situation B, it's this alternative standard. Or you have a series of criteria, and if it's this, this, and this, then it's a different standard. And that this kind of loose, or you can make it anything, standard really runs afoul of those court cases. Am I kind of doing that correctly, Chuck, in terms of my understanding of it?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. ZBA grants variances, not planning zone.
So following that, I don't think this language is really supported probably by the case law any longer. So it should probably come out. And
Gary, I find the language confusing because you're saying that it's measured from the footing, and people don't realize that the footing is below frost, and you're really talking about, the 4.5 feet above grade for retaining. And then
you've got a point.
It's not an 8-foot wall, it's essentially a 4.5 foot wall, or 5.5 and 3.5. Am I doing my math right? No, 4.5, yeah, to get to 8 feet, because you're going to want to have, at a minimum, the footing is the
top of the footing is below grade, is what you're saying.
Below grade, right? And you have it, yeah, it's 3.5 feet below grade to accommodate the frost height. So I think people are going to be very confused by that.
I would imagine what we probably want is exposure above grade of 8 feet.
Right. So exposure above grade is going to have to be on another 3.5 foot wall.
Yeah.
Or, and the footing itself, the very bottom portion might be, extend into the slope for the overturning and all that. It needs to be designed. I would want to see that it was designed by a structural engineer if you're going up 8 feet.
It needs to be, if it's above 3 feet, I believe it needs to be designed by an engineer.
Right. I just didn't say that here. It should, but when you're saying 8 feet, it's a structural wall situation.
Right.
But it's just unclear that it's not the top of the footing, it would be the top of the finished grade, 8 plus 8 feet, if that's what your intention is.
I think that's how it's been interpreted. I don't know if we've been looking at the language per se as close as we should have been. And then we've, had this sort of out in the bottom of the sentence. So let me look at some language.
I don't think it doesn't read 8 feet above finished grade. It reads.
Yeah. Let me look at the language and we'll talk to the town engineer too and come up with some language that puts that into the regs, that it's 8 feet above grade.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying, because I didn't really know what you meant by it. So.
Yeah, it's not. This has been in the regs at least since 2011, if not before. So
8 feet is a darn tall wall for a retaining wall. That's what I thought the original intent was. We keep our retaining walls low.
Well, I think this is mostly talking about commercial projects or where you're altering grade. Right now we've got. We've had the only time this really came out, they were talking about, I think, the CoreGen site out in the south end of the Bittersweet Farm. There was a proposal to do research and development, company headquarters there. And they, because of the grade considerations there, were looking at doing 8 feet, 4 foot terrace, another 8 foot wall to make it work, to create parking areas. I mean, they did make it work. That never went ahead. It did get approved by P&Z. I think there was some wetlands issues though, but I don't know. I think they solved them, but I'm not sure. I remember right. So I mean, this, for that kind of commercial situation where they're looking to fit something into a difficult terrain, it's a sort of balancing act between allowing development of property, but limiting the amount of grade alterations so you're not basically, terraforming properties either. This is what the standard's been.
For a huge commercial site, the scale makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, could look at trying to do two different, kinds of approaches, one for residential, one for commercial, but
no, it's nobody in a residential setting would commit that kind of money and the size of a hole you need to make the footing for something like that.
Yeah. I mean, we did get that conceptual proposal for that property in 250 North Main Street where it's already altered, and you have that huge rock wall, and somebody was looking at developing some of these multifamily, I think they wanted to go 4 stories or some of them in there, and we're talking about hundreds of housing units. So,
well, right, I mean, but that's also a project that's, trying to do a full scale, it sort of comes back to the stormwater. You're doing a whole subdivision, you're taking, doing a big sort of planned development on one property. And yeah, then you're going to get into a lot of these, whether it's stormwater or retaining walls, that's where that's what happens when you have a lot of land available. It opens up your ability to do things, unlike when you're in the town center and you're trying to think about future density. Everything's already parceled off in tiny increments, and the only way you're going to get, these higher densities is if they start to recombine the parcels. But I am hearing and coming to the conclusion on a lot of issues, the landscape regs for one. I really think that there needs to be good distinctions about some of these general things like retaining walls, stormwater, planting, that, that apply to residential versus other areas. And I think that's an important distinction that maybe we want to consider, down the road.
Yeah. No. Point taken. Yep. All right. So we're going to move on from that, and we'll put the word wall back in and end the sentence there. This is just some, it was frankly a mistake. Should have said once preliminary, not final plans are submitted. And it just doesn't have the word preliminary approval. This is for open space residential development. And it's also almost a moot point because I think there's a provision in there as well to allow preliminary and final to be combined, which I think they did for the only time we've applied this recently that I know of, which is the Buckley Road development. But at least it would clean up the wording here. This goes back to the group daycare home and daycare centers. The state statute basically has, my understanding, preempted all the standards that are been in the regulations here. So those two categories of uses need to be considered the same as a single family house. So all of these are basically not supported by statute anymore. So we need to take them all out. And that's mandated by the statute change. This I'm going to turn over to Evan to explain a little bit more, but goes back to the McDonald's. Last application was approved when we had this question about the queuing spaces and where the measurement of the lane should start from.
Yeah, I'm sure you guys all remember this one. There was some debate over whether the spaces should be measured from the pickup point or the ordering point. I did some research and I think you guys also concluded that the measurement should be from the initial ordering point. So this language just reflects that determination that you guys made.
Moving ahead. Here. All right. So everyone can still see this, section 9.8?
Yes.
Okay. This is a section that requires for all special exception approvals, the filing of plans in the town clerk's office, which have been 24-inch by 36-inch plans, similar to subdivision Mylar. There have been a lot of situations where there have been special exception approvals for different uses issued where there's been no change in the site plan, no change physically in a property. It's just basically tenant space. It's now the home of a special exception or a use requiring a special exception approval, where this really doesn't apply, or it makes no sense to file the survey or the site plan from 1995 or 2003. And it takes a lot of plans that we have copies of either physically or digitally. And I think in the evolving digital world we're all a part of, actually filing physically these plans in the town clerk's office doesn't really do any good. And it just clutters up their map storage area down there. And there've been a lot of objections, kind of to this practice. So we're proposing to take this requirement out. Most of the towns I've worked in, 3 or 4 in Connecticut worked in, have not had this requirement. And again, we still have an approved plan that needs to be followed. It's just not necessarily filed in the town clerk's records. And I'm not sure it's necessary. So let us know what you think. We have not put this, it wasn't in the original list of issues from December or in the document I sent you a couple weeks ago. But if you're okay with it, we can put it into the document, just taking this section, this requirement out.
If that's the staff's experience and it's based also your experience at other towns, I'm in favor if you think it should come out.
Anybody else have I'm assuming you're okay by not saying anything. And
is there something filed digitally in lieu of a physical plan?
It's not filed digitally in the town clerk's records because I don't think they have a revision for digital filing like that right now. They have the physical documents sometimes scanned so you can see them through their system.
Okay, well, that's what I mean. That there's some...
Yeah, I mean, that's something I'd like to look at with the town clerk. If it's digital, maybe that filing system would be expanded and it makes sense. But if it also requires, having a paper or a Mylar copy of a plan that's either not even new, filed down there, that doesn't make any sense. So let me check with them. I think taking this paper filing requirement out makes sense anyway. But if there's a way to augment that, and I'm going to have to talk to the town clerk and see what her legal constraints are as to what she can put in her system digitally. She might be limited to what's in her paper records right now. But hopefully maybe that'll evolve over time. And, we can sort of add things to that it would make sense to have it available digitally, I guess is what I'm getting to.
Well, if this is the source of authority for record retention, then it would make sense to remove the need for a Mylar here because the information is recorded otherwise.
Yeah.
Why take up the space with the Mylar? But if there is a different source of authority for record retention, then that would be a problem.
All right, I'll look into that, and we can, I'll try to give you more information as we, send all these to public hearing and get to that level. That makes sense?
Yep.
Okay. All righty. Going back to the main list here. There are several provisions in this section 8.1 regarding things that are non-conforming, such as buildings, for example, that do not match up with current statutory requirements. So my understanding is the statute was changed several years ago to basically provide more protection for non-conforming buildings. I mean, it used to be the rule you had to leave up a wall or a part of a wall of a non-conforming building, and then you had the ability to reconstruct it. Well, now I understand statutorily, even if you take down a building, as long as you can say, demonstrate it was your intent to not eliminate the possibility of having that non-conforming building rebuilt, then you have the ability legally to do that, and you're grandfathered, if you will. This kind of thing where, if it's destroyed by fire more than 75%, blah, 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 that's all, it's my understanding, not in sync with current statutory language. So we will double, triple check with the town council, but I think all these provisions are just confusing. And other discussions we've had with him, he said, well, clearly the statutory language trumps our zoning regulations. So we've had some situations where people have come in and would say, well, Section 8.1E1 doesn't apply because your, statute allows you to do it anyway. This section here, we've had a couple of circumstances. I think Sterling Ridge was sort of the, semi-poster child for this, where we've had plans prepared by non-professionals or professionals preparing plans that may be within the four corners of their license, but it's really, not the ideal situation where you're having a professional engineer do landscaping, for example, which I think they have the legal authority to do. That you really should have a landscape architect do that, even though we do have a provision currently in the landscape section of the zoning regulations that requires landscape plans by a landscape architect. We do have a waiver provision too. So this came up specifically for a project in the town center, and this language would just specify, look, we'd like site plans prepared by a professional engineer or land surveyor, architectural plans, building drawings, elevations prepared by a licensed architect, and landscape plans prepared by a landscape architect.
Landscape architects are allowed to do site planning, and in many cases should be doing the site planning, because the plans that the engineers coming up with are limited at best. So I really would like to see it as an option, because my license does allow for me to do parking lot design, and I've done many high-level site plans, not just adding plans. And it's very deceptive to just say, or a landscape architect doing a landscape plan, because people don't understand that. And I see over time and time again, engineers come in doing things that, I'm not saying they shouldn't engineer the site or finish the grading or whatnot, but there's definitely a bigger place for landscape architects to come up with solutions, and architects too shouldn't be limited to just doing the buildings, drawings, and elevations, because, many architects are more than capable of coming up with very, good site plans.
Yeah, so many of them do.
I just think the language is a little too restrictive, and I really hate to see, I don't like being boxed in a corner like that. So, hopefully you can reword that a little bit.
I understand there's overlap, and I think there are some limitations. And the flip side of the coin is having a professional engineer design your landscaping plan. So there is that overlap. And
well, I think that's incorrect, because because I've seen what they've done.
I understand. And if you talk to an engineer, they would say, look, because we're supposed to be doing drainage, and a landscape architect, I don't think you guys are allowed to do drainage design.
I've done drainage design under the foresight of engineering.
Exactly. But
the point is that that's not site planning, that's drainage design.
It's interrelated though. Yeah. If this is problematic, we can just skip this for now, because like I said, we're just trying to get some low hanging fruit dealt with. But
I would do your homework and read, what landscape architects are allowed to do, by statute, as
I appreciate what you're saying.
So that if somebody wants to hire a landscape architect or an architect to do some level of site planning, but maybe not drainage design or what have you, that's consistent with the state statute. That's been the story all night, is that we need to make things. And I'm telling you that's not consistent.
No. I don't argue with you at all about that. That's I totally understand that that's correct, but
I don't want to see it continued. I mean, it's a very common misconception, and you're perpetuating it. So I'm it's a real trigger for me. So I really hope that you'll correct this. Okay.
Okay, let's just put this one on hold and you can look for it.
All right, sounds good. This is just some language cleanup. I frankly plagiarized this provision from another community where the relevant professional was a city planner and myself. So I've missed one word here, and I want to also add in the ability. Let's see, the town planner should notify the commission, town center, and also notify the Stony Creek Architecture Review Board for projects within the town center district and the Stony Creek Village District of any request for changes. So just to treat the Stony Creek Village District like the town center village district. Another statutory change. This is location approval process, which ever since I've been in Connecticut for 20 years now, it's been going back and forth between ZBA and the Planning and Zoning Commission. Sometimes the Planning and Zoning Commission does location approvals. Sometimes ZBA does zoning location approvals. There used to be a required public hearing. They took the public hearing requirement out and the criteria out. Various court cases. Now the latest iteration is they've dumped it all in the lap of the zoning enforcement officers. So all of this is all language that doesn't match current statute. We were proposing to take it all out because it just is not correct any longer. The Zoning Board of Appeals has developed sort of what they're called rules over time with respect to how public hearing requirements and so forth. And there really is no clear provision in our regulations that these procedural requirements apply to ZBA applications as well as commission applications. For example, fees, submit them on forums. I mean, most ZBA applications have been following this, and because there's a set of rules attached to their form, but those rules should really have grounding in the regulations. So I propose providing here for basically everywhere it says commission, adding in Zoning Board of Appeals, so that clearly the Zoning Board of Appeals applications need to follow the same provisions for date of receipt, which is all the same, incomplete application consideration. CBA can deny it by saying, look, this application is incomplete, doesn't have a fee, doesn't have this. So there's that. This consultation selection right now, there's this provision in here which has no applicability because the town ordinance limits consultations, if you will, and required outside reviews to peer reviews of traffic studies. So there's been a change in the state law. I discussed this with the town council a couple of years ago and suggested some language to allow outside review. For example, if town staff here was too busy by outside planners or engineers or whatever. And he said that was, he thought, going too far beyond what new state law allowed. But he did suggest some changed language to what I had, and it is right here. So basically, I've taken all his suggested language or modifications to what I had originally given him and just put it in here. And what it would allow the commission to do, or the CPA, to seek advice, opinion from other boards, officials, commissions, and also in accordance with this modified provision of state statute, you could retain a civil engineer, traffic engineer, environmental professional architect, blah, 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 to review, comment, and guide deliberations on particular technical aspects of any application, and have the reasonable fees for them paid for by the applicant. Now here you've got a provision that says retaining such outside consultants, the commission of the zoning board needs to make findings that the proposal of such technical natures require expertise not available from staff. So we're talking about something like geotechnical review for the rock slopes, a traffic study, could be some other specialized review of something. So there's a provision for providing an estimate of the fees for such technical review. And this is basically what we follow for hiring a peer reviewer for traffic studies. So it's basically the same kind of thing. Applicants submit the funds. If it costs exceed, then the commissioner of the ZBA will have the authority to assess supplemental fee to cover the additional cost. We've had some traffic studies where the costs have gone up because there's been more information submitted by the applicant, more review by the consultant, and so forth. So this is all the language that would support that and allow some additional expert review of some aspects of applications. Another example is out in Gould Lane, there was a site that was residential development, and part of the property suffered some environmental contamination. And in that particular site, there was a fund available for the town to hire a licensed environmental professional to review proposal by the applicant to build housing and how that could be done safely. And I think there was a limitation on some of the units in a street called Louisa Court off Lamont Lane extension, where they were limited on slab construction. And when they got to the point of actually building the units, the developer wanted to put in basements. He talked to the licensed environmental professional about how to do it, came with vapor barriers and all kinds of other technical provisions to allow that to happen. They came in, applied to the commission. We went out and hired a licensed environmental professional to review what the applicant's licensed environmental professional said. Worked it all through, got approved. They got built with basements. And that cost was, in that case, covered by this contamination fund, but that's not available all over the place. It was just a particular site for whatever reason. Whatever legal, I think it was a court case that created that. So this would provide for the ability of the commission to hire a licensed environmental professional to review a proposal like that in the future at the applicant's expense. Any other questions about that? Okay, I'm going to keep going. Again, adding in ZBA here to notice of budding property owners to clarify they're going to acquire that, which they're legally allowed to do, I understand. This should really go out. There's some language here, return receipt requested. You don't need to do that for certificate of mailing. So that just got in here erroneously. I did look at the state statute, and it can be from the date of receipt, which would give us a few more days to get the notice out rather than the day of submission to our office. So I've double checked some of the wording of some of these things and tried to tighten it up closer to the statute. And for example, this language has been amended to, address the full requirements, and add in the word, DEP is now, used to be DEP, now it's DEEP, but that's been the way for, I think it's been like that for almost 10 years more. Let's see, no changes there. Added the ZBA in here. And then bonding requirements, discussed this back in December. And I think as I recall, the consensus was that any kind of bond, where really terminology is financial guarantee, less than $5,000 of value, could be established and released by the zoning officer, town planner, without the approval of the commission. Because you were feeling like there really is no need for anything that small to be reviewed by the commission. And we also talked about using surety bonds and how they're problematic, and this would and we've been, I think, sometimes having conditions on approvals to prevent use of surety bonds. This would enshrine this in the regulations. My understanding, the commission was fine with that. So it'd be, adding this wording here, saying that unless there were changes to statutes requiring the commission to accept them, surety bonds would not be considered acceptable. And removing surety bond here in the list of ways to actually provide a financial guarantee. And then we just added this wording here. If they change statute in the future, it would be actually other forms of financial guarantee mandated by the state law. So not just letters of credit. That, I believe, is it. What is your general direction for staff? Do you want us to go ahead and make an application with these and go ahead and get a public hearing date set, or what?
I think, Harry, thank you for going through all of these. There were several that I think you wanted to check with the town engineer, or we tabled. I hope you took note on those. But
Yep.
the majority of them, I think were fairly good as is.
Okay.
And there's no reason. One of them, I think the state, we said we'd get done by, the daycare one. We have to get done.
By the end of the
So
year.
my sense is, let's start going forward. Whether we do them all one night, I mean, you just spent whatever 2.5 hours explaining them. So
Yep.
I don't know. We may need to break them up, but but I think there's no reason we can't get started. Anyway, that is my thought. Others, Joe Chadwick, what do you think?
I think also that there's a large number of them that are just no-brainers we can just deal with. Some require a little massaging, some require some discussion.
Yep.
Not hold everything up. Let's find the really simple ones, and whether that means just sort of issuing everything with the checkbox that we send in, and you can just total up the check boxes and see which one is the easiest ones, or just from your recollection of our ramblings here tonight, put together a package of easy to approve or urgent need to approve, and we'll just deal with them. And the other ones we can stroke our chins and chew on a little longer.
Okay. I will come through for that if that's the consensus. Unless I don't mean to jump in, but it seems like that's the direction I kind of heard before too.
I would limit the number and do 10 at a time or something, unless they're really small. But and just every meeting do 10, and just so that because we were discussing this how long ago. I mean, my opinion has changed on a couple of things, to be honest, because it was a while ago. And I think, you've done a great overview, but to keep the continuity, if you just put 5 on the agenda, and maybe they're super easy ones and we know we're going to get through, and then do it on, and every other week, just hit. And if one's going to be more discussion, then maybe just do the one. And then that way we're at least.
I'd like to do more than maybe 5 or 10. I'll tell you why, because every time we've got to put a pretty extensive ad in the paper. So it's going to cost us a few $100. I can try and look at a reasonable amount, so we're not having, a 3-hour public hearing on 25 of them.
Yeah, I understand. I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, maybe in 2 or 3 pieces of what we've got here. Does that make sense? Where it's,
Well, maybe there's a way to group some, so we're discussing philosophically the same types of things. Like, to me, walls, rock slope, stormwater, and some of those, they kind of go together. And then some of the other things that might be more, change a word here or there, might be another whole list, or, something like that. I don't know what the right number is, but I mean, this was fairly intensive, and I think you're going to lose the public on it with this long of a.
Yeah, I mean, I've done it. Yeah, I've done it before. I've done more, actually, frankly, with the whole, and going back to 2011, I mean, there were, huge meeting only public hearings where they did, 5 or 10 times this amount of stuff. And I'm not saying that's the best process, but this is not unusual, I guess what I'm saying. But I'll break it up into at least 2 or 3 pieces, I think, and I'll look at how that makes sense. Think about how to group them, that things that sort of are, should be in similar categories, similar things. But I think some of the simple wording cleanup, state statutory language cleanup, I'd like to get done. And some of the things we sort of discussed a couple of times, and while there's a consensus among, the commission now, go ahead and do it. and frankly, that maybe, some of these items may have generated more discussion on the commission and concern than they're going to generate by anybody else. May not take 2.5 hours at a public hearing. Maybe I can run through some of these things in half an hour, 45 minutes. I break them up, the whole group in at least 2 pieces, maybe 3.
Yeah.
Sound okay?
I don't know what the public is concerned about. I don't even know, to be honest. I mean,
I don't either. And, the other thing is, as happened here, as soon as you start talking about the regs, you're like, well, can we change this and look about that? And they everything brings up everything. So, but, this is a way to start in anyway. And I think we'll have to do a lot more work collectively, staff and commission, on the zoning regulations, going forward.
Will topics be aggregated for ballot? In other words, everything that has to do with daycare, that would be one vote.
Yeah, I think what I would probably do is have the document I ran through with you, but also have something like the issues list, which has the topic and sort of explains it in more plain language and says, this is why we propose the changes. The changes are the sections blank, blank, blank in the numbering.
Yeah.
Sort of make it more understandable for the public and everyone what's going on. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just rather than have sort of a line item, having to a line item vote on sort of every serial issue that came up, things like the daycare.
Oh, no. You could vote on them. You would be voting, let's say I broke it up into 2 or 3 pieces. So you'd have a proposed set of regulatory changes be a vote on the package.
Right.
But I would have also a document that says, okay, the group family daycare, whatever, there were 4 changes to the regulations to implement the state law required mandated thing. Here's what they are in a group as a separate document. But you'd be adopting the actual wording in here or a modified version of that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, just so long as we have like a bunch of common defensible things together, so that we don't end up getting caught with like one, persuasive negative that holds up a whole bunch of other stuff.
Yeah. And I think there's a couple of things I didn't, as Chuck, you mentioned, things that need a little bit more massaging, or there was some discussion about like mandating, professional engineer, landscape architect. I'm just going to take that out. We'll get back to that.
Yeah.
So those kind of couple things, I'll take right out of the document, and we'll just revisit those later.
Yeah, and you want to check with town attorney or town engineer, but okay.
Yeah. There's a couple things I want to run by both those people.
Okay. Anyone else who hasn't spoken want to have any further comment? I think we've given Harry direction, but I don't want anyone else. Okay. So you're moving forward. The idea is you're going to break it up into 2 or 3, and you're just going to start the process, and we'll get them on the agenda and we'll start moving. And by the way, if we don't like them, we'll just vote them down or withdraw them. I mean, so whatever.
Yeah. And just to make it super clear, part of this, it's implied, Chuck, you'd be authorizing the application. So I'd run whatever we're going to put together by you before I submit it out for referrals and whatever, and actually create the actual application. So,
yeah.
Chuck, Fred Russo, can I say something?
Sure.
This actually is to Harry. Again, just out of curiosity, it sounds to me, and I think I'm right, I hope I am, that what we're doing is proactive, and it's not because we're being pressured to do this. I know there's regulations that our regs should match up with the state, but I'm just kind of curious. Has there been any, pressure put on your office that these need to be changed? Is it a great urgency for that to happen? I agree with everybody what's been said. I think the faster we do these, not we do them the right way, of course, but the quicker we get these things through, we can go back to the business at hand, which is it can start piling up. Like the next meeting, for example, is 6 or 7 public hearings. So I was just wondering, is there real pressure? Because you said also that you were not even sure there was any pressure coming from the outside. I just wanted to see if that was true or not.
Well, it depends on the topic, but there have been, for example, situations where for these concrete pads for equipment. I mean, there's some things that were people having to go get variances, the Eversource issue with the platforms that are problematic on a kind of routine basis, that it's not any one person. It's just we have to tell someone, look, you got to do this. Whereas if we could streamline the regulations a little bit, that removes problems for people.
I agree.
So that kind of thing, yeah, there's pressure. I mean, in the sense that we're sort of putting people needlessly through process they don't really need to go through.
I'm all in favor of making the system more efficient for the people that are using it. And I think that's what we're doing here tonight.
Yeah.
I'm good with it.
Yeah. And frankly, these are the smaller issues that we talked about. So there's other bigger issues like, there's affordable housing and there's all the other things that we talked about, whether we're going to routinely require set-asides in larger multifamily developments. That's a whole big discussion to have and see what you guys want to do. But again, like I said, I'm going to probably look at whether we have a little bit of money to get a consultant on board to help out with some of those, and they can devote more specific and focused time to it and sort of help you guys figure out how you want to approach these things.
Good. Thank you.
All right, I will move ahead then and appreciate all your attention and feedback. And I think that's it, unless, Evan, you've got anything else. I mean, there are other things going on, but I don't need to really get into anything else tonight.
Nope, nothing for me.
Okay.
Great. Anyone else got anything? Not then, does someone want to, I guess, make a motion to adjourn?
Fred Russo makes that motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn by Fred. Is there a second?
Chadwick seconds.
Second by Joe Chadwick. All in favor, Joe Chadwick.
Chadwick is in favor.
Fred Russo.
Fred Russo's in favor.
Joe Vayuzo. Joe's muted, I believe.
He might have been the echo.
You are unmuted.
Joe Vayuso agrees. Approves.
Marcy?
Marcy's in favor.
And chairs also.
Okay, thank you again. Have a good night,
everybody. Good night, everybody.
This program was brought to you in part through the support of the Town of Branford. Watch town meetings and other videos on demand at BranfordTV.org.